Well, this is somewhat unexpected. Ladies, gentlemen, friends, family, Page Society associates and guests, thank you. I must say, no one is more surprised to be standing here than I. Page Society dinners usually involve a couple of drinks, conversations with friends and colleagues, and then a seat at a table near the exit. At my age, that always seems like a good idea. I'm not a great fan of my giving public speeches, particularly to people I know. I am very enthusiastic, though, about others giving speeches. So if I must, I'll take the advice of Lady Macbeth, who said, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well if it were done quickly. She was speaking of something else, of course. As you know, I'm a school teacher, and my world is one of lectures, discussions, case studies, and incessant packets of ungraded papers like the one in my briefcase upstairs. Being in the company of my Page Society friends, I can say, is the third greatest honor I've been given in life. The first was a yes from my high school sweetheart. When I asked Pam if she would agree to marry me and share a life together. The second honor is actually a tie between the privilege of wearing the uniform of a United States Air Force officer for 20 years and the opportunity to walk into a Notre Dame classroom 4 or 5 times a week, close the door, and see if something useful or interesting will transpire. We're each the product of those who trained, nurtured, disciplined, and encouraged us, those who provided samples of exemplary behavior, goals worth striving for, and persistence in the face of failure. So, on behalf of all those who told me to keep going, make a mid-course correction, bear down, reject discouragement, or do something to make life better for others and the world we inhabit a livable place, to all of them, and many are right here this evening, I say thank you. I know it, you know it. I couldn't have done any of this without your help. We're all better because we choose each day to help one another. A friend asked long ago if I had learned anything after a career in the military and a relatively successful run as a college professor. I said, yes, I've learned there's no money in it. I've also learned that money is pretty far down on my list of priorities. Developing skills in others, watching them succeed, having a hand in a good result are all much higher on my value set. I've learned, though, that you can't do this if you don't know what you're talking about. You can only write and teach what you know. But I will tell you, that doesn't seem to have stopped or even slowed some who've taken employment in public relations or corporate communication. I know, sounds cynical. What I'd like to speak about tonight is the astonishing gap between our skills and the success of our businesses. That gap is breached only with knowledge, and its acquisition has been a passion of mine for most of my life. It has driven all I've done for the last 50 years as a teacher, and it's why I think you should pay attention for the next couple of minutes. A good friend of mine, many of you know him, served as chief communication officer of a prominent Chicago bank some years ago. On occasion, he will tell the story of an encounter with his chief executive and the limits of his own credibility. At a senior team meeting one morning, my friend leaned forward to offer an idea and was brushed back by the CEO. I think this will be helpful, he said. Not now, the chief replied. A repeated request for airtime was directly rebuffed. He buttonholed his boss in the hallway after the meeting and asked, "What was that about? I have an idea I think will be helpful to the bank." The CEO looked directly at him and said, "Kurt, you don't know how the hell banks make money. And until you get that figured out, you'll just be the guy who writes press releases. Got that?" Well, as painful and humiliating as that felt, my friend was more motivated than ever, first to find out what drives a bank's success, and second to establish some credibility for the communication function in his organization. It took him several years, untold personal hours of study and travel, and a substantial commitment to the process, but he did it. And he was able to sit up at that conference table and speak in a language bankers understood. I think it's too bad more aren't similarly motivated. Plainly said, too many communications specialists just don't have enough business acumen. They don't understand how the organizations that employ them make money. Worse, they can't articulate the competitive advantage or value proposition their employers offer. They're unable to describe in detail the scale, scope, or organization of the market space. They can't explain the elements of the supply chain or the processes at work in their operations or management strategy for growing market share. Worse yet, the vast majority of them can't read a balance sheet or explain the elements of an income statement or describe an SEC 8K. Not that they're alone. Plenty of people in most businesses can't describe those documents and are completely in the dark on how their company competes. Now, I'm not speaking about anyone in this room this evening. I'm talking about the people you're trying to hire. Communication professionals with little or no understanding of business are ubiquitous. They're literally everywhere. They can crank out a press release if someone else tells them what to say. They can plan a product rollout if someone else shows them how the device works. They are, in a word, completely dependent. They rely on the expertise of others to do their own jobs. My task as a professor of management is to help prevent that from happening. 27 years ago, I began writing management case studies, each focused on communication, to drive students to understand the structures and process of business. Maybe a brief example can help. A fellow named Jim Lohman was CEO of a Tier 1 supplier to the auto industry in the Midwest. His board came to him and said, "Jim, the daycare center we inherited when we bought the injection molded plastics plant is killing us. The annual subsidy is more than $300,000. It's time to pull a plug on that thing and tell the employees." Lohman knew that none of the alternatives were good. He couldn't throw 165 children in the street and tell their parents to go away. Those men and women were his employees. He couldn't simply trim costs and quit feeding the children or increase the student-to-instructor ratio. Those things are covered by state law. And he couldn't go back to the board and simply say no. His job would be in jeopardy. I ask my students what they would advise, but first I make them identify the business problem, not the communication problem. Then list and analyze key stakeholders, people who have something to win or lose, and then I ask them to look at critical issues, options for action, implementation strategies, timelines, and communication tactics. Finally, I ask for at least one measure of success. How will you know if you succeeded? One CEO I worked with said, "Well, I would like it if people would hate me about 20% less." I said, "It sounds achievable, so we need to get to work." So I walked my students through a break-even analysis, and in the end, they discovered that raising tuition for each child by about $1 an hour would make it possible for the center to break even. There's a lesson in microeconomics here. High-quality child care in Lohman's plastics plant had flattened the market for such services throughout the area. There was nowhere else for those children to go. The numbers tell a story, but they do not make a decision. I don't care whether you keep it open, whether you close it tomorrow, or whether you lease it to a third party. I care only that you devise a plan, consider the consequences, and defend your decision to those who care most. If you can't make this decision and successfully defend it, you don't belong in this business. A case study is more than just an exercise in memo formats, business letters, or social media postings. It's a vivid, authentic example of the kinds of problems senior managers face each day. It's up to them to give the VP or managing director workable solutions that will make the problem go away. At the same time, they're responsible for protecting the reputation of the business. None of this is possible if our students and new hires don't understand the fundamentals of business. This is crucial. If we don't offer insight and business acumen to the C-suite, they'll simply relegate us to task-oriented roles, writing press releases, firing off tweets, uploading video, or checking the overnight Radian 6 ratings. I could go on, offer more examples, additional cases. I won't, though. You'll find more than 400 of those on the Notre Dame website. Download as many as you want. They're $2 a piece. The remarkable thing to me is that all of this is fixable. Here are 3 basic ideas for senior communicators in large and complex organizations. First, it takes so long to develop senior CCO level talent because it takes a very long time for most communicators to acquire real business skills. Again, it isn't communication, writing or speaking, that's holding them back. It's a nose and a mind for business, market-based enterprise savvy instincts. So why not consider hiring entry-level corporate communication talent with business school or economics training? It's easier to teach a BBA or an MBA how to write a narrative lead or a set of Q&As than it is to teach a journalism or communication grad how to read a balance sheet or an income statement. Those B-school undergrads have studied everything you'll need to know, from capital markets to macroeconomics, financial reporting, and more. So here's another thought for business and communication schools. Why not begin cooperating with one another? Comm schools present a ready-made opportunity to teach both tactical and strategic communication to business students. And of course, communication, PR, and journalism students would benefit greatly from access to basic courses in accountancy, finance, marketing, and management. Quit operating in silos, start thinking cross-functionally. How about corporate sponsorship for an MBA or a 1-year Master of Science in Management, Finance, or Business Analytics? Identify high-promise employees, offer them 11 months of advanced education. They can do it in 2 days a week and keep their day jobs. Finally, how about some in-house training? Bring in experts who can teach your communicators how their clients make money. Consider a 1 or 2 day seminar on capital markets, supply chain management, SEC reporting requirements, or more. B-school faculty would be more than willing to custom tailor a program for as many as your people you can get into the room. They won't get a degree or even a certificate, but they will get some understanding of process and structure, as well as a little vocabulary and street cred in business. It's up to us to grow our own communication leaders. We can't simply poach talent from a competitor or ask an agency account exec to jump and think we've done our jobs. We must build loyalty, talent, skill, and integrity in our own staffs. Many of you know I'm headed for London in January to teach in Notre Dame's business education programs in the UK. I'm eager to see what the Brexit process does to the economy and how the best of communicators handle the challenges to their own organizations. I'm also eager to get back up to Cambridge to visit my old school. As a graduate student at Christ College, Cambridge in the 1970s, I lived across the lawn in Second Court from the chambers occupied by the naturalist Charles Darwin. I read his shipboard notes, Voyage of HMS Beagle, and his magnum opus on the origin of species. They both fascinated me as a young student, but what's most interesting to me is the misinterpretation of his original work. If you stop a fellow on the sidewalk or in the shopping mall and ask what the lesson of Darwin is, the more clever among them will say survival of the fittest. The lesson of Darwin is not survival of the fittest. The lesson is adaptation to a changing environment ahead of the requirement for it. Our environment is changing before our eyes. The climate is changing, the global economy is changing, the distribution of income and wealth is changing, the demographics of our society are changing, and many of our cherished, most basic values are under attack. The lesson Mr. Darwin passed to us from the early 19th century is simple. Those who adapt live to breed more of their own kind. Apply that as you see fit. Change is inexorable, If we refuse to change, if we fail to adapt, our competitors will. And should we survive in a changing world, it will be under someone else's direction. Please know that a world I design for myself will be much easier to live in than one designed for me by someone else. And remember, our profession extends well beyond our skills. It must include deep and detailed knowledge of the business itself. Absent that, we have no credibility. So I say to the awards committee and to the trustees of the society who've chosen to bestow this honor, thank you. I'm surprised and enormously grateful, and to each in this room, those whom I know well and those whom I've yet to meet, thank you for being part of my life and a part of the profession we love and value so much. And of course, if I can do anything on your behalf, ring me up. I'm easy to find and grateful for your company. Thank you.